Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first ever three-round table spooky spectacular. This is a day-long event where we're going to celebrate all things horror and spooky themed through the lens of games, comics, graphic novels, film, and media of all sorts. My name is Danielle Costello. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member at large for the Games and Gaming Roundtable of the American Library Association, as well as our event programming co-chair. I'm also a research librarian for Louisiana State University, and today I'm here hosting and for some high mayhem. Russell Brandon, our Twitch star, will be running tech for us. So give him some love in the chat. He'll be assisting with popping all kinds of good resources in there. This event will be held live. However, if you need to leave or would like to watch again on Twitch, we have a video on demand accessible right after we end the stream. And if you aren't following us, Game RT on Twitch, please do so we can build the channel. Links for all the places you can find us, our partners, will be posted below, as well as a big resource list. So please check those out. And for anyone not familiar with who we are and the folks running all this, let me give you a brief intro. To start, we are the Games and Gaming Roundtable of the American Library Association. Our mission is to promote games in the library, whether it's programming, collection development, community building, prototyping, playtesting, or research. Joining us are the Film and Media Roundtable, which provides leadership within the American Library Association on all issues related to video collections, programs, services, advocacy in libraries. We understand video includes all formats, including analog and digital, multimedia that includes video content, and network delivery of digitized or digital or digitized videos. I got it out, guys. And then the graphics, novels, and comics roundtable are also here today, and they unite the graphics novel and comic roundtable, which unites library workers, educators, comics advocates to promote comics and libraries of all types because comics are for everyone. Join the conversation at libcomix, LIBCOMIX. We have a hashtag for you to follow as we go through today's events. Please share all your favorite spooky things using the hashtag ALA Spooky22. That'll be added below. And so now that we've explained who we are, let's get into today's programming. Roundtable is a program where we bring together several librarians and have a chance to talk about our favorite media, libraries, media within that libraries, and all the ways we can bring fun and play into our spaces. For today, we're exploring the spookier side of things. So as you know, the format's going to be, we start off with a topic, chat together, answer some questions, and let's get started. To begin, Liz Brown, if you'd like to introduce yourself and who you are, go for it.
I could take that question a couple different ways, Danielle, but let's start with the basics. My name is Liz Brown. I am a support staff member and recent graduate at the Baltimore County Public Library in Maryland. I'm also the treasurer of the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable and the secretary of Gaming Roundtable. And today I am Vampire Kermit.
Thank you so much, Liz, Vampire Kermit. And Rebecca, if you'd like to also introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Rebecca Strang. I'm the president of the Games and Gaming Roundtable, and I am also a children's librarian at the Naperville Public Library in Illinois, out in western Chicagoland. And today I'm just a baddie person.
I love it. I love it. And our Film and Media Roundtable folk, if you'll also introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Atina Lavanos-Probst, and I am the chair-elect of the Film and Media Roundtable, and I also lead the membership committee. I am the digital librarian for PBS Learning Media. We do take the cool PBS shows that you like, and we make them available for free for K-12 classrooms. That's what I do. And I realized this morning that I own like no orange or ghosty things until I found this one singular sweater, because I'm trying.
All we need for you is try. And Elliot, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Sure, I'm Elliot Stevens. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an English Studies and Research Commons librarian, basically an arts and humanities librarian at the University of Washington in Seattle. And, for me, one of the highlights of being in ALA has been being a member of the Film and Media Roundtable. We just talk a lot about films and movies in all kinds of different formats, but also we talk a lot about media creation. We've had a series of webinars where we've talked about how to make media or spaces in which you can make media. And it's also just been a total delight working with you all in Games and Gaming RT and graphic novels and comics RT. Like, to me, this is like the best of the ALA.
Yes, 100%. Take note, rest of ALA. We are the cool kids now, and we are in charge. So to start that off, let's go into our favorite pieces of media for the spooky horror genre and why you love it. And anybody can answer at any time, or I could call on somebody like we're in class now, and you are my students. Liz, go. You're laughing at me.
Um, let's see. I'll start with like my personal preferences. I like monster movies a lot because I kind of like having that abstracted lens of examining humanity through by interpreting our fears, our our flaws as something different than us. And I just like that dialogue back and forth. And anytime you get to have fun props and costumes, I really love that sort of tactile element of horror. I can handle gore, but it's not what does it for me in the horror genre. I love monsters.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same, Liz. I Gore isn't so much my thing, but I love like spooky and like maybe a little like psychological thriller part of horror stuff and like puzzly horror stuff too. So I love that we have all of these different forms of media where we can explore it in ways that are fun for us.
Like I was never super into like the jump scares. I hate a jump scare. But I love a slow build monster that's gonna leave me afraid to sleep at night for a good few weeks. But I always am with you guys. I monsters over creepy people. Like creepy people is way too realistic and will haunt me. But give me like a monster movie and I'm down. And I also like I made this joke a little while ago. Like, you don't go through life with my name without getting way too into mythology. So, like, I will always look up like the classic history and like what strange mythological creature is such and such based on. And then have way too many random factoids. But that's why you become a librarian, so that people go, "Ooh, you're fun," as compared to thinking you're weird.
100%. It's a brand that we like to, express.
Mhm.
I put this in the Twitch chat, but Liz, what you're saying, it makes me think about at the University of Washington this quarter. I've been working with a teacher who's like, she's teaching a whole class. It's all about monstrosity, and so they're spending the whole quarter like watching films, and I don't know if they're playing games. I forget if they might be watching a reading a graphic novel, but like they're just investigating it this whole quarter, and then they're going to have to make some kind of digital book where like they're going to make their own digital book that's all about their theories and thinkings about monstrosity, how it appears like in like popular culture, but also in scholarship. And I think they also get to like make their own monsters if they want. So it's definitely, I feel like it's such like a site of entertainment, but such a site too of like teaching and learning and coming together as a community.
That's so awesome. I am gonna have to look a little closer at that project because if they're not incorporating games and comics, they should be because that is such a natural fit. When you talked about having them make their own monsters, that's game building right there. That's the monster manual in Dungeons and Dragons. That's character design. That's really awesome. It's exciting to hear.
Which segues very well into kind of what I'd like you guys to dig into next about what makes the genre unique in your particular kind of lenses. Like, what makes a genre unique as a game or as a film or as comics? What changes it from kind of the different medias?
I think with games, one of the cool things, I mean, when you watch a movie or you read a book, every time you read it, you can learn something new. But when you play a game, you can have different outcomes every time or almost every time, depending on the game that you're playing. So exploring those different avenues or the different stories within a game is what makes games really exciting for me. Um, Especially like if it's something where it might be a cooperative storytelling game where the story changes literally every time you play it, or it's a competitive head-to-head game, and depending on the things that you do in the game you're playing, that's also going to change the story, and there can be different winners of the game, different outcomes that way. So that's one of my favorite things about games is their ability to both tell stories but tell different stories each time that you interact with them.
So for me, to be fair, I don't have a huge grounding in monster and scary movies. When I was thinking about this, like, oh, the things that I always would gravitate to for scaries, I realized that I would watch scary TV. Give me classic 90s monster of the week. I was always really down for it. And one of the things that I think that just you keep coming back, it's that balance of you're going to be disconcerted but safe again. And I think that's a really understated thing of Monster of the Week. We've gone to very like, please explore your long-term psychological damage over the course of this in like a long story arc. But there is something nice about knowing your favorites have plot armor and it makes it safe to get out of your comfort zone. I think that's a really cool thing that genre TV is able to pull off of explore, come back to safety, explore, come back to safety. And I think that just allows for a flexibility of thinking and taking small risks and just really teaches you like, oh, maybe I can go a little bit farther, be a little bit more brave and bold. And then hopefully nothing eats me. Fingers crossed.
And Atina, what you're talking about, it makes me think a little bit about, I don't know if this necessarily brings up the uniqueness of, I was thinking today about wanting to talk about or thinking about I was thinking about like scary movies, but in particular like A24 scary movies. And I noticed in the Twitch chat, there's a little bit of talk about like psychological horror. And I think there's an element of that about that to me that's very, very interesting. But I also think it's useful, like some of what we're talking about, it reminds me of there's this book, it's called The Uses of Enchantment by Bruno, I think it's Bettelheim or something like that. And the whole thesis of this book, The Uses of Enchantment, it talks a lot about fairy tales and storytelling and how the point of maybe a fairy tale, especially scary ones, it's not so much that you learn a lesson or that you learn like beware the witch or something like that. Like I think stories are also meant to be a place where anyone, but maybe particularly children, like they can also identify with like the witch or with the monster, and they can like put on that clothing a little bit and feel like maybe the power that comes with being scary or being out of control or transgressing like human like things that are maybe accepted in human society. And I think like to me that's one of the exciting things about the horror genre or scary movies or scary video games is that like it's a place maybe to like kind of like feel some of these things without necessarily like doing them like that's an important thing I think for human beings to do, is to explore what is it to be human and what is it to be a monster, or what is it to be scared or what is it to scare somebody else. So I like that concept of like that enchantment is useful, and it's not really something to shut down for people.
Excellent. And so I think it would be fun to dig in a little bit more. Why do you think our audiences and our patrons, like going off of that idea that we want to delve into the monstrous, why do they identify and like really like this kind of media within our different collections?
I mean, Liz kind of hit earlier on being able to explore, like looking at humanity through like that kind of monstrous lens, but also being scared sometimes is just fun. Like you get that adrenaline rush when you're scared by something. And so when you can experience that in a safe place, like you're at home watching a movie or playing a game or reading a book, whatever it is you're doing, and you can kind of control the scare level, if you will, like it's fun to be scared and people enjoy the rush that they get from that. And I think that you can explore that really well through all the variety of media that we have, in addition to exploring humanity through that lens.
And I also think horror is one of those genres that kind of crosses over and hybridizes with other genres really well, because I think we can all probably come up with a couple examples of things that are fantasy horror, sci-fi horror, and like it really meshes in with other sort of tropes and genres. So it has that real crossover appeal. And I think that make like it took me a while to like realize, oh, I do like horror. I am a horror fan because I was a sci-fi fan. I was a fantasy fan. And it's just gradually the content I was consuming also became inclusive of horror, with Pan's Labyrinth and, things that at first glance might not be, or maybe one genre more than another, but they are definitely inclusive of like those themes and those emotions and those stories that are being told.
I think, yeah, it all kind of works under, we like to be scared to almost remember that we're safe. Um, and like you get that it's like, why do people enjoy roller coasters? Because it feels cool. Like that's why. And so there's a bit. It's funny, Liz, that you were saying that it crosses over with science fiction fantasy, because like yes, absolutely. I think there's a lot of horror that definitely crosses into both of those really readily. Um, you have things like Get Out that are kind of like a sci-fi horror deal going on, a lot of fantasy horror, and then you have those, the ones that I think kind of collectively decided weren't necessarily our bag, of like the modern, like realistic fiction horror. Um, so there's ones of those too where just like it's a subgenre across all the genres, and it's like you can always find a home for something that's going to get your heart pumping and get you flipping pages, or wanting to just see the end of this and see how it goes, to see who makes it. I think there's a bit of, no matter who you are and what you decide, what you think you like, that there is a place for being scared, being startled. There's a place for horror within the things you already are enjoying.
That kind of makes me think of the idea of being scared and to be in this kind of particular place and space in my own head. I really like the seasonality of horror. I like that there's a full kind of, this is the time where which we get to be scared and feel all those experiences, and every year gets layered over and over. It's like, ooh, what kind of little am I going to go to an escape room, or am I going to go to the kind of fall maze? Like, I like the idea that we build space to be scared in this way, as like kind of a humanity, like this is the time for those kinds of thoughts and feelings. So moving into our collections, does would anybody like to talk about the collections they have right now that are in this genre, and how you're collecting within it and getting more materials for to be delight your patrons and get them scared and spooky?
And I guess I'll talk about that in a second, but I think one thing I just wanted to go back on with like what Liz was saying is I think the other thing that's really great about something like Pan's Labyrinth is like, you can definitely enjoy it as a horror film, or also like put it into context with other horror films or across other genres, but it can also be a site for like learning about the Spanish Civil War or the concept of the faun, like in other scary contexts, or like maybe like the history of like the concept of like eating death or something like that. And so I think and that's what I like about some of the A24 films, is that, you could watch a film like The Witch and be scared, but I think you could also, it could be a way to learn about settler colonialism, or it could be a way to learn about you know like historical periods, or maybe even like traditions of film. Like you might see like, oh, this filmmaker seems to be very influenced by Stanley Kubrick or Alfred Hitchcock or something like that, but you might say like, well, why aren't these filmmakers being influenced by more diverse filmmakers? Why is it a bunch of like maybe white guys that are making these films, or that are inspired by these things? So I think it's like in the classroom they're just rich texts. And I would say, like, in terms of collecting, I think sometimes at the university level, it's when we talk about this in FMRT quite a bit, is that it's really hard sometimes to provide films for people for classroom use. That, you might be able to buy a DVD, which is great, and put that DVD on reserve, but no one really has DVD players like on their computers. So you have to have DVD players ready to go that people can check out, or maybe a station in the library space. And so, or the other alternative is in the library, is that we will get like a special license just for that court. Like, so a teacher maybe wants to teach, like, I'm teaching this monster class. I don't want to teach 10 films. I want them all streaming and available. We can try to do that, but it ends up being like really, really, really expensive. So this has been a huge stress on library. And I'm sure I'm not saying anything new to anyone here in public libraries, school libraries, any library anywhere. This is a gigantic problem. And it means that we cannot study things like film in an equitable, open environment, because things are so locked down and proprietary. So it's I would say it's a challenge to collect and have a good collection for films.
I might be diverging a bit from the topic here, but what you just said was really interesting to me, Elliot, because it also made me think that these films and these different genre media are very much like endemic of the times in which they're created. The same way sci-fi doesn't actually predict the future, it just reflects on the time that in which it was written and the concerns of the time in which it was written. Like horror films are very good about like encapsulating the time at which they're created. So even though like I'm not a fan of Halloween, the movie, like it is very much like a good summary of the time period and like that suburban fear of like the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s, that it encapsulates, it really encapsulates an emotion. And I think because horror is so emotionally bound and driven, you don't always see that in other period type films. And it's kind of interesting to see how, as the genre has progressed, like there are like distinct time periods and eras of horror in terms of like what's popular. Is it slashers? Is it the sort of we sort of have a theme of like psychological drama emerging, and now there's like this really concerted interest in true crime, and how that's another interesting topic for maybe someone who's a little more on top of true crime. Like how much is true crime actually true? How much of it is sort of fictionalized or storytelling, more on the memoir side of rather than autobiographical, that kind of thing.
And I kind of want to talk back on what you said about like the difficulty of getting this into our libraries equitably, because the same thing happens a lot in video games as well. Like the struggle of one, which console how, but then we have classic video games that do, like Liz said, speak to the moments that they're in. Like Resident Evil is a very particular moment in time and horror, and but then we have consoles that are aging out, and then what about emulators? So there's the really interesting discussions to be had in how to preserve the human record in these particular forms of media. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Does anybody like? I don't want to do a hard switch. If we want to hang out more in the collection area, if anybody has anything more to say about that, let me know.
I feel like I would be remiss in not representing comics too well if I don't mention that horror has been a comics, or at least horror has been a part of Western comics since floppies were being published, and that the fact that they were kind of, I think it's worth noting that they contributed and were the victim of the seduction of the innocent trials. And and again with Satanic Panic, we saw that like that's a cyclical thing that emerges in the public eye of this censorship of horror media in these different genres, which we all love, but we also probably all know that they can be difficult to collect sometimes. uh,
Actually, that is one of my questions. So we can move into that one, like because we have so many challenges happening in public libraries, also across the sphere for a variety of media. What's challenging about this media to bring into our various sectors, academic, public, all those areas?
I think one of the things that is a fairly universal issue with this, because again, I'm not in a normal library, and so like I'm assuming this from talking with other people. But I feel like there's an assumption of like massive context that we are always bringing to these things. Are like, oh, it's a product of its time. Let's look at it as a historical artifact. Let's dive into it for the following reasons. And when like that's just a base assumption that I think we all bring to collection development and to sharing our collections with others of like, check this out as an example of whatever. And when you have those same films, those same comics, those same games as just like a free floating that people aren't getting that context, it plays really differently. And so it's that whole thing of, well, if you're scared to dig into the context, it's going to make the media in question much scarier, and much more controversial. And I think that becomes a very real thing of how do we take our assumed context that we know is there and makes this something worthy of study, worthy of interest, worthy of collection, and share it with people who are scared off by title.
I have no solutions for you. This is a new area I'm digging into as well. I do have one experience where we're trying to play one of Jackbox's games. It's the murder mystery, the murder mystery one. And because there was murder in the title, I had an admin who was like, "Well, you can't possibly play that game." I'm like, "This is the least murdery of all the games I could potentially have to play. I have so many more thematically like horrific and like gore filled games, but this one's just like it's Looney Tune style humor." And so that speaks very much to my experience as well. It's like the name frightens off people from, and they don't even look to the content of it.
Yeah, that's something we are very familiar with comics being read by one panel instead of in the entirety. Uh, I don't need to go into that too much more. There's lots of other information. The Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable has a whole task force for helping you find resources to address those issues.
Also, there was one comic series I read like 3 issues of, and it scared the bejesus out of me. And I don't even remember the title of it. I just remember trees were literally eating people if you like promised them someone's soul in exchange for a wish.
oh,
And I still
Interesting.
see like a dark forest. I'm like, pledged is pledged. You can't go into the forest. And I don't even remember what the thing was. I just remember that comic was freaky. And I was a grown up and I was like, noping right on out.
Well, we'll see if we can find that comic and do some magic and add that to our resource list because that is the dopest, most amazing line. Like, yes.
yeah.
But I think,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think, some of this stuff, I mean, it's like it's this ever-present thing, but it also like goes back hundreds of years. I think there's this concept that's called like anti-theatrical prejudice, which like Jean-Jacques Rousseau is writing about, where it's like this belief that if like you consume a certain kind of media, that it's gonna warp you in a certain way, or that by like somehow using your powers of imagination in a certain space that you're going to be taken over by it. And I think it's just something that people have been saying for so long, that like, oh, this is a kind of low media, or this is a kind of perverse media, or if you consume this media, then you're going to do something bad. And it seems like there's always been this, or there's often been this anti-theatrical prejudice about anything that's considered scary or strange or unusual.
I want us to be the low media roundtables now. Like, desperately want that to be our new tagline. But it's so hard, especially in academia, to kind of combat those kind of preconceived notions of what is worthy of scholarship and worthy of research versus you're playing some games. I'm like, and it's very serious. I'm very seriously playing all of these games. Like, there is a depth of creation. There is lots of hard themes that people are dealing with. This brings people joy. I don't know what's more worthy of study than the things that bring us happiness and joy in this very terrifying world that we live in now. So horror around us, all of it. And I like the idea of being able to use horror to grasp the horrible and like in a way that is manageable for our human brains. Like, this is something I can grasp versus the, great unknown. The cosmic horror is the thing that really gets to me.
Yeah, and I'll point out that that's, I think, one of the challenges to recommending media in the genre is like, because kids love horror, but like it can be really difficult to find things on their reading level and to like ask the questions that will actually give you an accurate assessment of what they're looking for. Because I absolutely believe that kids are the primary and maybe the only people who should be deciding what they do and do not read, but like asking the kind of questions for like judging what they're looking for can be feel it they can feel socially taboo sometimes, like, so do you like murders? I mean, you're not going to ask that of a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old or a fifth grader. It's a little awkward. I see your mic coming on, Rebecca. Please go ahead.
Yeah, as a children's librarian, that definitely hits hard for me. Like, and so I'm primarily work with game collections in my library, and I do tons of games programming. But when we get reference questions and they're asking for like spooky or horror books, it is interesting with kids because you're right. You're not going to be like, well, you want like a really bloody murder, or what are you looking for with your horror? Like, are you looking for something? Do you just want something that has monsters in it, or do you want something that's going to like spook you a little bit? Um, and I think games, compared to books, graphic novels, and film, they kind of go through the same cycle, like you were talking earlier with the whole satanic panic, like Dungeons and Dragons and games that feature, dragons, sorcery, witchcraft have all been through that cycle. Um, and luckily for me at my library, we haven't, I run a kids RPG program and a family game night and a video game club, and we kind of just run what we want, what's popular with the kids. Um, but and then again with video games, at least in the United States, as far as banning goes, like video games in the US have to go through the whole entertainment software rating board. And that, at least with video games, I think kind of gets some games around some of the issues that books and film have to face a little bit. I feel like the public jumps on books and film a lot more because those forms of media have been more mainstream for a longer period of time, even though gaming has been around forever. It just doesn't get the same lens for some reason from the public, unless something like Dungeons and Dragons gets a huge loud crowd about it like they had when the game came out with the whole satanic panic. um, but there are games out there that we can recommend to kids. Like if a kid wants to play a game that just has monsters and they want like spooky monsters, there's things from Game Right like Monster Mambo out there where there's nothing scary about the content of the game. They're just putting monsters together and it's cute and adorable, spooky fun. Um, or things like Ghost Fight and Treasure Hunters, where you're a bunch of kids going into this house that's haunted and you're looking for treasure, but there's ghosts about. You can make it as spooky or not spooky as you want, but there's these cute little ghost minis that it has. So it's always interesting working with kids, like figuring out what the line is, like what they're really looking for. But the same could be said for adults as well, really trying to figure out what they want. And I think that's all in the art of the reference interview, which we're all familiar with.
I was going to say, what's harder to do good reader's advisory on, horror or romance? Because you're asking really personal questions on both of those. How much murder are you okay with? Are you cool with dismemberment? No? Okay, let me adjust. But I think one of the really big, important things, and it comes up with games, it comes up with comics and books, and it comes up with like film and television. Like, with games, it's always a little bit mind-boggling to me when people get very upset. So like, you can make it less scary. You're in control. If the book, if the movie, if the comic becomes too scary, you can hit pause, you can close it. You don't have to keep going. And I think there's like a reminder of like the power of the reader of like, if it's too much, you get to choose to not. Like, I am a huge advocate for quitting a book if it is not working for you. And that's not even if it's too scary, but like, there are movies that I'm cool that I haven't finished. There are books that I'm cool that I haven't finished. And I think that's one of those of, especially when you do a reader's advisory and you're not sure, because you're just like, there's a lot of evisceration in this one, but we're going to give it a try since they seem kind of creepy. And you hand that one over to a patron and just like reminding them that they can quit.
Mm-hmm.
That quitting's a viable option.
I love that so much because that speaks highly or closely to the a lot of things we do in TTRPG with safety tools. And like very much like there is a whole mechanic of walk away. This is an open table. You can at any point walk away. Nobody's gonna get mad. Everything's fine. If at any point you want to fast forward past something, like we actually within some safety tools use kind of the lens of media for and like the mechanics of media to deal with some of our safety issues. So it's like there's the pause, fast forward, rewind. We can move past things that we don't like or things that upset us, but we want to still kind of hang around. Like we're not sure how deep we want to get into our heads and into this horror space, but we always have the tools to be able to push past things that are scary or pause when we want to reflect some more. So yeah, definitely. I think there's some nice overlap between all of our areas together.
Yeah,
I will.
that's exactly what I was going to say too, Danielle. I love all of the safety tools that RPGs have. And I also love that at least I see it a lot more, I think, with indie stuff, but more in general is becoming common to include content warnings and provide safety tools or links to resources for more information. Sorry, there is work going on in my roof right now, if you can hear that. Um, but I love that all of those tools are becoming more and more available. It puts more control into the consumer, the player, the reader, the watcher's hands when they if they want to look ahead and see what the content is like, they can do that. And I think it's great when creators make it easy for consumers to find that information.
Nope. Yeah.
I was gonna say I mean I think one, unique or maybe powerful thing though about the media as well is I would say like I think sometimes in the horror genres, like there is the chance that an indelible image could be totally impressed on your brain when you're like I remember as a kid, just you know, there was a babysitter and like going to sleep and kind of waking up late at night, like, and like the babysitter was watching like John Carpenter's The Thing, and I think I saw some of like the absolute worst parts of it, and like, like that's still as a 41-year-old person, that stuff is like deeply, deeply ingrained in me, and the feeling of like seeing that stuff. So I think there is an aspect of it that is, can potentially be deeply scary or like part of it. I mean, what you were saying earlier about kids and like what they had come across too. I was doing some homework help at a public library earlier this week, and I was talking to a second grader about like we were doing some reading together, and we came across the word jester, and I was saying like, "Oh, jester, have you heard of this word jester? Do you know what a jester is?" And they didn't really know what it was, so I was saying, "Oh, a jester is like a clown. Do you know what a clown is?" And they were like, "Oh, like Pennywise." And I thought, what? I guess like Pennywise, but like, how much do you know about Pennywise? And so I just kind of like that would
That's like all clowns, Elliot. That's just baseline.
Yeah, that's something we've been talking about at work lately, because we're watching a lot. I don't know. I don't know if it's just this year or just the people in my work group, but like we've been seeing a lot of TikTok videos of like toddlers going to Spirit Halloween for the first time and just carrying around their creepy baby dolls like it's any other toy. And it's fascinating to me that these kids are so nonplussed by the things that we would consider horrifying. I'm just really curious about how they're going to grow up and like what
Oh
their
man.
perception and their range of emotional capacity is going to be, and like how they're going to react. Is it going to take more spooks to scare them? I don't know. Maybe they'll be so super resilient.
I really want to give the scary stories, the scary stories to tell in dark series that
Yes.
terrified me. Now I want to give it to somebody that's such like my nieces. Like, here you go. I need some reviews. Tell me
Because
how
I
it
would
is.
be remiss if I did not mention the TV series that also did some deep emotional scarring as a child. I grew up in a very religious household, so I snuck Nickelodeon's Are You Afraid of the Dark? But I cannot to this day say the phrase "I'm cold" without remembering that one specific episode of the little ghost who just wants his jacket. And I'm just like, it's still in my head always as the "I'm cold." And it's just one of those of like, there are these things that, yes, I totally could have turned it off because that episode freaked me out. It was like the most terrifying, scarring 30 minutes of TV I 100% chose to sit through, and then could not talk to my parents about it because I had lied and snuck it anyway. But it's just one of those, like, there are things that scar us, but I don't necessarily think I'm mad at having that scar.
No, no, 100%. Like, I think we want to have intense, exciting experiences in our lives, and our media does that. So even if we're not sure, we're gonna hang out, and then we're just gonna kind of look wide-eyed. Like, because children have their own kind of youth culture of like, this is what like the Bloody Mary, like, I couldn't look at a mirror. I still can't be in a closed bathroom with a mirror. I will be terrified forever. But that like there's still like this like it's a delightful kind of fright. Like, I was part of like that group that believed in this weird thing and still do. Terrifying.
They're one of my memories from childhood, and it's kind of funny looking back on it. But there was some show like Hauntings in America or something. I don't remember the title of it, but they were talking about this this toy store in California that was haunted, supposedly. And I was like 5 years old and somehow came across this on TV and started watching it. And the story involved like a haunting at this store, but there was some like lovers quarrel and a guy somehow like took an axe and chopped it into his leg and was haunting
Ugh.
someone who works. It was a whole thing. And as a 5-year-old, I don't know why I didn't stop watching, but it gave me nightmares for a long time. Severe nightmares for a long time. But then later, like when I started like wanting to pick out like my own chapter books and things, what I gravitated to was always ghost stories. I was obsessed with ghost stories like all through elementary, middle school, into high school, and I still love to read a good ghost story. But it's just kind of funny looking back, like that was such a traumatic experience for me, and it was all about ghost stories, but I don't know, I love ghost stories.
I think that speaks to the kind of cultural nature that the genre has. Like, there's definitely parts that like I love knowing about all these spooks and haunts of my particular regions and areas that get passed down to me either through other people telling it, like little kids telling, like, "Hey, it's the same Bloody Mary has been told by children for ever, like time immemorial." But then there's like kind of the local haunts and happenings. So I love that it grounds us in our various cultures and regionalities as well.
You're muted, Danielle. You're muted.
I'm a dig dog. Hello, everyone. I said some cool stuff, but mostly it was 15 minutes. And that if anybody in chat wants to toss in, there's a lot of really great comments going on, good chatter. If anybody has any particular comments, questions they want to ask of the panelists, it's libraries, media, all of our favorite things. We do have like next to us stacks of just cool stuff that we're very excited to share too. So let us know. Oh, I know. I was just saying, like, I think that horror is fantastic because it grounds us in culture and in like our various areas and that kind of good stuff.
And I will say to
Sorry.
all the people talking about the things that Doctor Who has left you scared of, I was going on this week and I was like, if you have watched Doctor Who and are not now afraid of statues for the rest of your damn life, you have not watched enough Doctor Who. My neighbor across the street straight up has a weeping angel in their front yard, and I don't know what's wrong with them. It's always there. It's not a Halloween decoration. It's just there to kill
Delight.
us.
A delight, truly. Oh,
I have a stack of games behind me, so I'm just gonna share one of them.
go for it.
This is Nyctophobia, the vampire encounter, and the designer of this game, Christine. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on your last name. I'm so sorry. Stiple or Catherine Stiple. She um, designed this while working with blind gamers. And so the entire game is a tactile experience for the players. The person running the game does have to read the cards and be able to see the game, but you're wandering around in this forest like area and kind of feeling these pieces on the game board that kind of feel like trees. They're like these 3D printed kind of pieces that are a little pokey on the top so you can feel your way around the forest and see the paths. And it's so atmospheric. The players have blindfolds on when they're playing, or when we played it in the dark with also blindfolds on to make it extra dark. And the person who's controlling the board, running the game, can be as spooky or not spooky as they would like. Definitely talk about this with your players beforehand and get consent. But it's fun if you can like whisper creepy things in their ear while you're playing, or like do like jump scare things with like shoulder touches and whatnot. It's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it.
Excellent.
I have one favorite thing that falls into the horror genre that I actually do on the regular, which is I exercise to the thought of zombies chasing me. If no one has played Zombies, Run! Exclamation point. The exclamation point is very important. It's an app. It's an immersive storytelling where you are a character in the narrative. You are just runner five. If I could make more fives out of this, that would be great. And the story happens around you, and the characters are there, and they're 200 meters behind you, run. And you're always being like chased and encouraged and going on adventures and missions, and it makes the fact that running is arguably quite boring into something like really fun. And when I first started, I was in it fully for narrative as compared to for exercise, which really gets over the fact that running is again objectively horrible. So it's a little bit of gaming, it's a little bit of interactive storytelling, it's a bit of multimedia, and it is absolutely delightful. I think they're wrapped up season 9 recently, so there's a lot of zombies chasing you in a post-apocalyptic wasteland with incredibly lovable characters.
Speaking of mobile games, any Pokemon fans out there, if you play Pokemon Go, the fall spooky season just started yesterday. So the entirety of Pokemon Go right now has like fall leaves and pumpkins, and all of the ghost and dark Pokemon are out to haunt you. So it's
Yeah.
adorable and
I
fun spooky.
I don't think there's anything that brings people to programming better than a spooky theme. Like anytime I have themed with Halloween, zombie, event or anything to do with spooks brings out like every patron imaginable. I think it's like trivia in that it's a very accessible, like people understand and know like, oh, I know the experience I'm getting into. It's going to be some like frights and like a little bit of horror or like a little bit of spooky, and people come a running. I love any theming for a spooky event.
And I think it is really fun to talk about this stuff. I mean, just looking at the Twitch chat, I mean, I'm paying attention to us here in the panel, but then I'm seeing other things coming up about like, oh, have you seen, what do you think about Jordan Peele or Stranger Things, and like how they dealt with the satanic panic and Stranger Things. And I just feel like I immediately find that I want to like talk about these things. And it's just really, I think it is a genre either in video games or uh comics or like it's just, I think it's something that you want to talk to people about these things. So, and I noticed that we did get a question in Twitch chat just about, I don't think any of you mentioned this earlier, but at least in where I am in the academic library, I've never heard of anybody saying like you need to get rid of these movies, or I haven't necessarily heard of someone saying like, why are you teaching this at the University of Washington? Why is there this monster class? And like, have any of you encountered that in public libraries? Like people saying, challenging that, and you have to kind of take out the collection development policy or something like that, or push back on that? Has anyone said like, don't do this programming or don't teach this
Mhm.
or don't
Just
don't have these materials?
I just had the one instance that I'd mentioned where it was like, this seems like it could be a little too um, murdery, and we don't want that for our students. But it was like just a case of not understanding context. For the most part, our collection is goes into a lot of really interesting, deep, horrific areas just because it's not even horror themed, it's just humanity. So I think we have a case for if we can keep in like a lot of the stuff we have in our archival collection, we get to put in the other stuff that people generate as well.
Yeah, I feel like we don't get challenges because something is of the horror genre. A lot of the challenges, at least in the public library that we see, are more, people who don't want to see diverse books. So a lot of the challenges we see are more because something has, LGBTQ characters or storyline, things like that, but um, never because of the horror genre itself.
Never because of decapitation.
Yeah, just people
I
loving
do
each other.
want
Decapitation's fine. That's not a problem.
Well, I do want to, I feel like maybe I'm dating myself here, but there was that period, and I think it was before libraries could afford or could justify to purchase video games on like a wide scale. But there was that period of time where like Grand Theft Auto was being censored because it, promoted violence. And that's something that I think I don't know, maybe I'm pessimistic, but I think it's due to reemerge in a couple of years or so of like video games are too violent and they're ruining our kids and they're training our kids to be mass murderers, blah, 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 blah. I think that's definitely something that's out there. I don't ascribe it particularly to the horror genre because I don't think like Silent Hill didn't inspire that. It was like Grand Theft Auto and some of the more realistic games and Call of Duty, which I think maybe speaks more to how prevalent guns are in American culture. Um, but like the most recent example I can actually think of in our system, it wasn't public facing, but we just got a Stranger Things counting book in, and we're kind of like internally we're trying to figure out where does this belong, because it's a little golden book. It's count to 11. It has all of like the Funko Pop characters, but also like a Demogorgon, so we're like trying to figure out like who is the audience for this book, what section does it need to be categorized in. So that's kind of like an internal censorship topic that's been going on here at my branch.
It's a cataloging nightmare. Because like the target demographic for that show is not, there's no overlap in those Venn diagrams with Little Golden Books.
And the Demogorgon is not a happy friend time animal. It is much terrifying.
My little cataloger brain is just like, how?
I feel like there's a lot of those books, like more and more coming out, and I feel like some of it has to do with like the, Gen X, older millennial nostalgia thing, where like there's D&D counting books, there's Cthulhu counting books, all of those things. Like, so I just feel like that's a thing we're just seeing more of now, maybe because of the people who are making the books now, not necessarily the audience that they're targeting with the specific media they're making.
And it might be a matter of like we were talking about, like tastes in kind of what is scary change from generation to generation. So the great unknown Cthulhu and cosmic horror just isn't cutting it anymore. Sorry, everyone. It's just a cute friend. Like I see Cthulhu, like there was a run for every board game to have a Cthulhu edition, which made it like, how can the unknowable horror be horrifying if you know that's just a tentacle dude? Like, so it is interesting what changes and how scary becomes less scary over time. Maybe it's because we know like what's scary is unknowable, and then when we know it, it becomes maybe a little less.
I think
Yeah,
this kind of goes so. Oh, sorry. This kind of goes to what Elliot had said earlier about like people taking the small children to Spirit Halloween, and I'm like vaguely horrified by this conceptually, but also like those are the parents who are buying their nostalgia books for their tiny children, and it's that whole what scared us and was like a fond memory of like a jump scare is like the things we'll share with our kids as just something like the way that parents for time immemorial have shared some of their pivotal childhood memories with their children. And they kind of forget, like, oh yeah, that was the thing that made me wet my pants scared. And they just like share it with their kids. But like now that kid isn't scared of it. And they'll find new things to be afraid of.
Yeah, and I think some of the cyclical stuff we also see has to do with some of the copyright stuff where things are coming into the public domain. Like that's when we saw a lot, like there were a million Cthulhu games coming out because all of that content came into the public domain. And then Alice in Wonderland, we're seeing like a slew of Alice in Wonderland stuff. So as those popular IP, like things that have, hundred year following, as those things start to fall into public domain or people can get easier access to using them to create content, we're just going to see like slews of all of these things.
As we should, because Carmilla, the web series, is a delight. And everybody should watch it right now. And yay, like copyright's an interesting kind of. We should have an entire roundtable on copyright and how we deal with it in our various medias. But it does. Oh, go ahead, Elliot.
I was gonna say, I think Winnie the Pooh came into the public domain, and I think there's like this. I haven't seen it, but Winnie the Pooh, like it's like this horror movie. Or it's like, we're going to be watching together Nosferatu tonight as part of the Spooky Spectacular. And the reason we get to do that is because it's in the public domain.
Yay, the natural course of things. We all get to talk about the media that's created as the culture and is not locked behind, I don't know, a mouse or something. That's all I said, nothing else. It could just be a generic mouse, who knows? We have about 5 minutes. No, I got that. I got
Okay.
that, guys. I didn't stay muted forever. I learned my lesson once. So we got about 5 minutes. So any last final thoughts about the place that horror, spooky, all this genre stuff has in libraries?
Could I get in my media rec?
Yes, 100%. Let's do that.
I want to put this out there. This is a mini comic I picked up at a convention last month. I'm putting it out there because I want a publisher to pick it up and publish it because this is a mini comic. It's only like 32 pages. I want more.
Yes.
Please pay this artist to make more. It is Sleepover Sleuths. It's kind of like Babysitter's Club crossed with true crime. This one is about 3 girls who gather together every Friday to talk about their true crime, love, and addiction, maybe. And they sort of break out the Eileen Moore lighthouse disappearances, which was sort of the true story behind the lighthouse, which I think you referenced either in our document or earlier today, Elliot. It's one of those psychological thriller movies. But yeah, Babysitter's Club plus true crime. I think this is going to be so popular with our young readers. I need more of it, please. Thank you.
Yes, the roundtable's demand. The triumvirate says yes.
I have 2 other shares I want to put. I'm going to put the link in chat for an RPG. I mean, any age can play it, but we played it with our kids' RPG club this month. The game is called Numbskulls, and the GM is a necromancer, and all of the players are their skeletal minions. And there's a table where you can kind of set up a hook for the game, or you can just make up your own. But the hook for ours, we had the necromancer was wanting to throw this like super fabulous dance party, and you're sending all of your skeletal minions on various tasks to make this thing a success. And it works so well with kids. It's so much fun and it's spooky, but you control the spooky level of it. It's super great. And then a